Hello, everyone. This is the 241st episode of Soccer Nostalgia Talk Podcast. As always, this is Sean from Los Angeles and the Soccer Nostalgia blog. For this episode, I welcome back distinguished professor Dr. Laurent Bellaiche of the University of Arkansas as we discuss Girondins de Bordeaux during the Claude Bez presidency from 1978 to 1991. Dr. Ballaiche is also a professor at the Tel Aviv University, and he has also designed a new class called Thinking Outside of the Box, a course that involves science and football. Welcome back, Laurent.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be back, and happy holidays to you and everyone.
Thank you. Let's go back in time. What was the status of Girondins de Bordeaux Football Club in the French football landscape as we come to the decade of the 1970s?
So what we have first to know is that Girondins de Bordeaux is a very old club. I think it was founded in 1881, but it was gymnastic and shooting club. And then it came to introduce soccer in 1910, but only for 1 year. And then he came back again to reintroduce soccer in 1919, and he became professional in 1936, which is quite early because the first professional soccer teams in France were probably around 1932, 1933. And jumping back to before the 1970s, they only won once the French Cup in 1941, and only won the French title, which was in 1950 there. So not so great. During the 60s, it improved a lot because they reached 3 times the French Cup final between 64 and 69, but lose all of them. So it was a good team in the 60s, but then in the 70s, it was very mediocre. So it was usually on the bottom half of the French league. Old club, but not so great.
Claude Bez is the central figure of this Girondins de Bordeaux adventure in the greatest era of the club's history. Can you describe his trajectory upon becoming club president in 1978?
Yeah, he's a very interesting character. He's born in 1940 in Bordeaux. So Bordeaux is his hometown. He even plays soccer, but not in Girondins Bordeaux. He played in a team called Coq Rouge, which means Red Rooster. And in fact, he played the U20 Gironde final. Gironde is basically a department of France from which Girondins Bordeaux takes its name. And it was against Girondins de Bordeaux, this final. He started to wear a mustache already when he was under 20. And before taking the helm of the presidency of Girondins de Bordeaux, he was an accountant there. And he took the helm, he was only 38, 37 years old.
Alain Giresse would be the symbol of this era for the club as captain and standard bearer, despite falling out with Bez eventually. He started with the club in 1970 and for some time was overlooked and underrated due to the brilliance of Platini, who was his contemporary. What was his status as we come to the onset of the Bez presidency?
So this guy is beloved by French people for sure. He was extremely good player, extremely intelligent player, very small height, so very unusual at that time. It was 1 meter and 62 centimeters, and in American units, 5.4 feet. So he's born like 24 kilometers from Bordeaux. As you say, he started to play for Girondins in 1970, and he stayed there until 1986. So 16 years in that team is the team symbol for me. He started also to play for the French national team when he was only 22 in September 1974. And then for 3 years, nothing. He was not called by the French coaches. He started again to play for France in 77. Play against Switzerland. It was a very good game. I still remember that game where he played very well with Sanoun in midfield. And then he was called in 77 to play against Argentina in the absurd journey. He played a couple of times in 78. He was not called to play the World Cup. And then he was called again in T1 when it was the big games against Netherlands. So between September 1974 and November 1981, he was perhaps called 5 times. And no goal, no 78 World Cup. But as soon as Michel Hidalgo realized what a great player he is and how well he can play with Platini, he was a starter and one of the most beloved French players of all time. I mean, he was elected French Player of the Year in 1982, 1983, and 1987. He's beloved. Whenever you talk to Alain Giresse, to any French supporters, fans, they will only say good things about him.
What was the backbone of the Bordeaux squad upon Claude Bez taking over in 1978?
So what you had as a goalkeeper, you had Christian Delachair, who was solid, regular, not a superstar. In defense, you had Gernot Rohr, which
Also,
was
you had Philippe Bergeau for some time
that's
as a
true.
goalkeeper. Yeah, yeah.
That's true. That's true. He came from Bordeaux. After that, he played in other clubs. You had Gernot Rohr in defense, very tough one, but will stay for some years. You had a young guy, Jean-François Domergue, who will become
Oh, yeah.
famous in 1984 in the semi-final, France against Portugal, when he scored 2 goals. And you had very solid but not great players in defense, André Ferry and Raymond Camus. In midfield, you had Giresse, he's the star of the team, but you also have a very good Yugoslav player, Vukotic, who was 29 at that time. You had Philippe Rodon, that I like very much. He was very fast, he was 28, and this is someone who has also a degree in pharmacy, so he had everything, the head and the legs. And a young guy, another young guy, Jean-Marc Ferrage, he was 20 at that time. As a forward, you have someone who has a lot of experience. Jacques Vergne, who was playing for the French team, national team. André Tota, not so great. And you also had a very good player who was from Switzerland, Daniel Jean Dupeux.
Oh,
But
yes. Very
his
famous
leg,
manager later on. Yes.
exactly. But his leg was broken in October 1977 against Marseille in Bordeaux. This ended his career. So this was the backbone of the team. Really a mid-table team at best, I will say.
Yeah, and other players you have like Gilles Ekem, Jean-Marc Fourlan, Francis Mania in defense.
Right.
Other names you have the Cameroonian Jean-Pierre Tokoto. He
Ah,
also played
Tokoto.
for a
Yeah,
short
that's
time.
true. Tokoto was a good player. He came after that to the US, but to play indoor soccer. I like him very, very much, this
Yeah.
one. And Fernand was also a good manager, especially he was the specialist for promotion to second division to first division. He has done that, I don't know, 5 or 6 times with different teams.
In the season 1978-79, this is the first season with Claude Bez fully in charge. He appointed the former Real Madrid manager, the Argentine Luis Carnilla. This is a season where you have the likes of Jacques Vergne coming from Strasbourg and Christian Delachair came as a goalkeeper from Valenciennes. You have Georges Van Stralen coming
Mhm.
from Nantes. You mentioned Moka Vukotic, he came from Partizan. Others like Tokomon Nambatinge from Chad, he came from Nice. Philippe Rodon, you mentioned, came from Paris
Mhm.
Saint-Germain. So you see, these players are coming in. Tokoma Nambantige only would say a few months. And you have Bergerot leaving, he joined Lille. Tokoto left and joined Béziers. So there's some changes in the team. So in this first season, Carnilia managed only a mid-table finish at 10th place. Was this a necessary intermediate season for Bordeaux to slowly establish themselves?
I think so because they went from something like 16 the season before to 10th, which is not bad at all for a first season. Carnegie, it was a kind of surprise because he was a successful coach before joining Bordeaux. For example, he had one French title with Nice in '56, ancestor of a UEFA Cup, this Inter-City Fair Cup with Roma in '61, but especially 2 European Cups with Real Madrid. And he had in '58 and '59, and he was coaching people like Copa, Di Stefano, Real, Gento, there. He's also very famous in 1959 to not have played Puskas in the final there. So it took a lot of courage to do that. But the year after Puskas, I think he put 4 goals in the final against Frankfurt. So it was a very famous coach coming to a team that was not so great. And they did pretty good for the first year, I will say.
For the 1978-79 season, you have the likes of Gérard Soler coming from Monaco, Bernard Lacombe arrived from after a disappointing one season at Saint-Etienne. You have Albert Gemrick from Strasbourg. Omar Sarnoun, we
Mm.
mentioned in our Nantes discussion, he came from Nantes. Felix Lacuesta came from Bastia. And you have the Argentine Juan Domingo Cabrera coming from Talleres de Cordoba. And an important addition would be an unknown Jean-Christophe Touvenel, a defender from Paris FC. And the players who left, you have the likes of Jean-Marc Fourlan joining Laval, André Ferry joined Nice, Moka Vukotic left and rejoined Partizan, Daniel Jean Dupo returned to Switzerland, Philippe Redon joined Metz, and Jacques Verne joined Montpellier. So Luis Carnilla would be replaced in October by the Belgian manager Raymond Gotals, Raymond Le Science, who would make a comeback at the end of the decade as well. This was, as you can see, was a more ambitious transfer activity, and there was a slight improvement as the team finished sixth. And we should also mention that this was the first season where Bordeaux played without the maillot scapulaire. Before, remember, Bordeaux had
Mhm.
these diagonals at the top, these white diagonals. This was the first season with that historic design. So Raymond Gotals replaced Carnilla after 13 matches. There was this improvement. The team finished sixth. Was this the start of the birth of the Great Bordeaux in a
I
way?
think so. I do think so because, as you said, they started to hire international players, very good player, like you say, and also young player like Tournelle. But to have Sanoun, Gemrich, Bernard Lacombe, Gerard Soler, all international players playing for a national French team, it was great. And then you surround them by Alain Giresse, who can really direct the game. So I think that's the start. And to have Raymond Goethals, it was a great idea. As we know, he was a character. Sometimes he could not remember the name of his players and call them thing or that. It was very funny. And his nickname was Raymond the Science because he was very smart. And he will be the first coach that will win the European Cup for a French team, Marseille, in 93. And in 91, I remember there was this incredible game, Milan against Marseille in Milan. And so it's the Milan of Sacchi, Arrigo Sacchi. So very great coach, but Raymond Goethals did better than Sacchi that day in terms of tactics. Yeah. And before coming to Bordeaux, he has won quite a few things, like the Winner Cups with Anderlecht and Anderlecht of Rosenbrink. He was also the coach of the Belgium national team at the 1972 Euro there, and he was a great coach. I think France Football at one point voted who are the best coaches in the entire history of football in 2019, and they rank him 47. So a great coach coming to a team that was not so great yet.
Can you describe the concept of la politique des vedettes, the politic of stars?
So it's what you said. You begin to hire players who are already well known. As you said, for example, you already gave the name of Sanoun, Bernard Lacombe, Albert Gemry, Gerard Soler. After that, there were other people coming. For example, Marius Trésor, French idol, was coming from Marseille, was the French captain. François Brassy from Strasbourg, René Girard from Nîmes, the Yugoslav goalkeeper Dragan Pantelic, defender from Algeria, Korici, John Tigana coming, Leonard Spech, Raymond Domenech, German player like Memmering, and especially Dieter Müller, who was really a great forward, and then Patrick Battiston, Thierry Tussaud, Bernard Zenier. The goalkeeper Dropsy, who for me is one of the best French goalkeeper, and even the Portuguese Chalana in 1984, who didn't do as well as we expected. But all these guys were very famous when they came to Bordeaux. So it was not the politic of forming young players like Nantes used to do. Now it was really, okay, I want a big team as soon as possible. I'm going to hire very great players.
We should point out that in the initial stages where there were really no funds available, Claude Bez made a specialty of signing end of contract players to avoid paying huge transfer fees. He also got subsidies from the Bordeaux the municipality, from the mayor. Shaban Delmas, who would
Mhm.
become an ally for Claude Bez. So the city also helped Bordeaux as they were becoming bigger and bigger,
For sure.
becoming a
And
force. Yeah.
as you are going to see probably later on,
Yeah, of course.
it was
Yeah.
a lot of money involved. Yeah.
Yeah. For the 1980-81 season, Claude Bez made his most important decision by appointing the former Olympique Lyonnais manager Aimé Jacquet as the new manager. There would be more ambitious signings, including that of former French national team captain Marius Trésor. So you have François Bracci arriving from Strasbourg, Marius Trésor, we mentioned the captain of France from Olympique Marseille, along with Jean Fernandez, also came from Olympique Marseille. René Girard, who would be a symbol of this team, came from Nîmes. And the likes of Jean-François Domergue, he left to join Lille. Francis Meynier joined Tours. The Argentine Cabrera returned to Argentina to San Lorenzo. Jean-Marc Ferrach joined Nîmes. And La Cuesta returned to Bastia. Raymond Goethals himself, he left after one season and joined Sao Paulo in Brazil. With these ambitious signings, the team would be more involved in the league race, and we're definitely now a player and in the discussion as a potentially title winning side from this point on. And that season, in fact, they would finish third in the league race. So, how important was Jacquet's appointment in historical terms?
I think it was huge because he's really the one that pushed Bordeaux to one of the best team in France and even in Europe at one point. And you had a homeboy playing so well, Gires, surrounded by these beautiful players. But you need someone to assemble the team, and Aimé Jacquet did that. What is interesting is that before coming to Bordeaux, he was not very successful as a coach. I mean, he was coaching Lyon 183 times, but they lost 76 times when he was coaching this team. So it was a kind of a gamble. And some people say that, in fact, it was Bernard Lacombe who suggested to hire Aimé Jacquet because he was his coach in Lyon there. But what was interesting with Jacquet, as a player, he has won quite a few titles with Saint-Etienne. And he had two great coaches in Saint-Etienne. One was Jean Snella, and the other one was Albert Batteux. And he had always said, Jacquet, that these two coaches that won a lot of titles were a big influence on him. Perhaps this is also why Claude
Yeah,
Bez
they were the
wanted
greatest
him.
managers of France in that era, 50s and 60s. Yeah.
Absolutely.
This season, 1980-81, we already somewhat mentioned it when we were discussing Alain Giresse, but it would be significant for Alain Giresse in establishing himself with the national team in the spring of 1981. Taking advantage of Michel Platini's injury, he showed the then national team manager Michel Hidalgo that he could not ignore him. And even after Platini returned from injury, he became his partner and not his understudy.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a shame that a player of such quality only received his recognition relatively late in his career. I think he may have been like 28 at this point, which is kind of late in footballing terms.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. As we have said, he started to play for France in 74 and really nothing between 74 and 81. Very few couple of games, no goals, no World Cup of 1978. And when he started to play for French team more regularly, he was around 28 years old. So why is that? Is I think people at that time, especially coaches, think you cannot have two number 10. You cannot have two playmakers, and if you have to choose one, it will be Platini. But Hidalgo changed his mind after the game against Netherlands when he put three number 10 in the midfield, Platini, Gires, and Gengini. Also, we have to be honest, we knew he was a great player, but we didn't know if he had the international level because he didn't play so much with the national French team, and Bordeaux didn't play so much yet in European competition. Also, it's 70s, 80s. It was the time where models were like the Dutch, Netherlands, and Germany. And when you look Dutch player or German player, who do you see? You see Neskins, you see Harry Hahn, you see Rainer Bonhoff, Briegel, Schuster. All these guys are very solid, quite tall, very strong, very different from Managers who is only 5.4 feet. So someone had to change the mentality, and this someone was Michel Hidalgo.
For the 1981-82 season, there is the arrival of Jean Tigana with Aimé Jacquet taking his former player from Olympique Lyon, and the Yugoslav goalkeeper Dragan Pantelic, who arrived from Radniki Nice, as well as Algerian defender Noureddin Kourichi from Valenciennes. You also have Antoine Martinez from Béziers, who would be like a squad player for the next few years. And you have the departure of Georges Van Stralen to Stade Brestois and Bernard Blacard to Toulon. Bordeaux, again, are part of the league race and they finish fourth and were involved in the UEFA Cup and are eliminated by SV Hamburg in the second round. This is SV Hamburg of Franz Beckenbauer, Horst Hrubesch, Manfred Kaltz, managed by the legendary Ernest Happel. Were Bordeaux starting to establish themselves as a power little by little?
I do think so. If you look, for example, at the team, the whole team, I will say, so goalkeeper Pantelic. Pantelic is very special. Before he came to France, he scored a goal in Yugoslavia championship from 80 meters. From his own goal, he kicked the ball and it scored the goal.
Yeah, and he used to score many penalty kicks, in fact, for the
That's
national
true.
team and the clubs. Yeah.
That's true. And I remember I saw him in Parc des Princes, Paris Saint-Germain against Bordeaux. And I remember something I have never seen before and I never saw since. There was someone crossing the ball and he went into the air and he caught the ball with a single hand. Not two hands, with a single hand, caught it like that and brought it. He was quite an amazing player. Now, if you look at the whole team, so Pantelic in defense, great goalie. In defense, you have Rohr, Trésor, Kourichi, Brachy, Touvenel, very solid. In midfield, Girard, Tigana, Gires, Jean Fernandez, a mixture between solid players, tough players, and very gifted technically player. And in front, you have Soler, Lacombe, Gemrich, all internationals. So very good team, and they can do well. You can see that they can do well in the years to come.
In this 1981-82 season, unfortunately, it would be the only one with Dragan Pantelic. Claude Bez's abrasive personality against the league authorities was on display with the famous match against Nantes where Alain Giresse was forced to play as goalkeeper. Can you walk us through this farcical event?
Yeah, it was very funny. So it has to do with the game before. There was some problem in the tunnel going from the field to the place where the people change themselves. There, people say there was some kind of fighting between Pantelic and the referee there, and because of that, Pantelic was suspended 1 year. So Claude Bez didn't like that because Pantelic was injured. So someone said that the referee attacked him also. And he said, okay, you want to play that game? I'm not happy, so I'm going to put my 5'4" player Nigerians as a goalkeeper there. And in fact, he went with a shirt of a goalie, but he didn't play between the goalposts. He was in midfield. It was Marius Trésor who was supposed to play, but with no hands as a goalie. And just didn't even have gloves there. Jess was only supposed to come back for a corner kick there, not 1-6-0 that day, but it was really a way to protest against the decision to ban Pantelic for a year.
Yeah, and Pantelic, yeah, he was accused of, I think, kicking one of the linesmen. He was subsequently banned and suspended for a year and, yeah, never played for Bordeaux again. In this summer of 1982, many Bordeaux players were part of the French national team in the 1982 World Cup. Alain Giresse would have a magnificent tournament and would finish second in the Ballon d'Or voting. He was also contacted by Inter in the Serie A, but he chose the stability of Bordeaux over a big money move. Was Giresse at his zenith at this point?
Yes, I think so. I really think so. For example, if you look at his World Cup there, so he played all the games except the third place game where Michel Delegau put the subs. In particular, he played against Austria when Platini didn't play. Platini was either injured, I think he was injured at that time. And so they put a midfield with Gires, Tigana, and Gengini. And the next game is against Northern Ireland. And so far, except the first game against England, France has played with three midfielders. So people were wondering, who are we going to take out? And people even suggested to take out Platini, which is a cream plates majesty there. But Hidalgo had the genius to say, I'm going to put the four of them together. So this is how the magic square was
Le
born.
carré magique, yes.
Carré magique. And during that game, Northern Ireland, 4-1 for France, 2 goals of Gires, including one from a header from someone with 1 meter and 62 centimeters. And then he scored the third goal against West Germany in semi-final, 3-1 for France. Unfortunately for us, Germany came back and we lost in penalty, but GRS was unbelievable during that World Cup. And I think I have read that at one point he didn't know what to do. Am I going to stay in Bordeaux? I'm going to go to play in Serie A, which was becoming the best league in Europe, with Platini also joining Juventus there. And I think he told his wife, we're going, and then he changed his mind. He stayed there.
And I was just going to say that actually Gires scored 4 goals at the World Cup because the goal against Kuwait was ruled out. It was a just goal, but of course we all know the whole farce regarding the Sheikh coming on the field and protesting and all that. So yeah, it could have been 4 goals. Other Bordeaux players at this 1982 World Cup team we have, along with Gires, we have Trésor, Tigana, Lacombe, Soler, and Girard.
Five
And
of them, absolutely.
yeah, and Girard scored against Poland, I think his last match for France. And also Nureddin Kurici was playing for Algeria, and Pantelic was Yugoslavia's goalkeeper. So many of these Bordeaux players were at the 1982 World Cup. 1982-83 season. We have Saint-Etienne in decline with the La Caisse Noire scandal. So Girondins de Bordeaux were now credible title challengers at this point. You have the arrivals of Richard Ruffier, a goalkeeper from Nîmes, Raymond Domenech from Paris Saint-Germain, Leonard Spech from Strasbourg. You have the German midfielder Kaspar Memmering from Hamburg, Michel Audran, a striker, came from Angers, and he would be a useful squad player for the following years. You have the German striker Dieter Müller coming from Stuttgart, and you have the likes of Kurici joining Lille, Jean Fernandez joined Cannes, Gemrich joined Lille, and Gérard Soler joined Toulouse. Bordeaux, again, with the municipality providing some funds, they started buying players. Ruffier originally came, I think he was a necessity because of Pantelic's suspension. Though I don't think it was successful, as I think Christian Delachaise became the starting goalkeeper. But Bordeaux would challenge for the title, although that season it was the season of the irrepressible Nantes of Coco Suodo. Bordeaux finished second behind them. Also, they were active in Europe. They eliminated Carl Zeiss Jena and Hajduk Split before being eliminated by the Universitatea Craiova. So they were advancing in Europe as well. Were they on a verge of becoming champions at this point?
I think so, but as you say, this year Nantes was unbelievable. Coco Suedo really put a team what was wonderful. They won the title by 10 points ahead and scoring 77 goals in 48 games. You had Bossis in defense, phenomenal. José Touré in midfield, phenomenal. Bahid Halilogic as a forward, phenomenal. There, and they even eliminated Bordeaux in French Cup by winning 4-0 in Nantes. There. But Bordeaux could win. You can see Bordeaux could win because Saint-Etienne was in decline, as you say, and PSG at that time was considered to be a cup team, not a regular team, and Monaco had young players. So you can see, and in Europe they did miracle, as you say, in Jena they lost 3-1 and they won after that 5-0 in Bordeaux. And at Just Split they lost 4-1 and they won 4-0 in Bordeaux again. So you can see the team can make some big games in Europe, can be a solid team in French championships. You can guess that the team is going to be good. The question will be if none can continue to play at this high level or not.
For the 1983-84 season, Bordeaux made their intent clear with their transfer activity. Veteran international Patrick Battiston arrived to strengthen the defense, leaving the sinking ship of Saint-Etienne. Bernard Zenier, a striker, arrived from Nancy. And more importantly, this was a symbolic signing. Thierry Tussaud was signed from Nantes, who were recent champions, as it showed that they were the top dogs now, that even the champions
Mm.
could not hold on to their best assets. Tussaud and Battiston would be very important signings of this Super Bordeaux team that was about to be born. Pantelic, I think, was definitely seeded at this point. He went back to the Yugoslavian league. Francois Bracci joined Marseille. This Bordeaux, they would win their first league title for the first time since 1950 in a very tight league race with Monaco. Bordeaux only won on goal difference. We
Mhm.
discussed in our discussion about Monaco, this was a very good Monaco side on its own right, with the likes of Amoros, Bellon, Daniel Bravo, among others. In the end, yeah, it was only goal difference that made the difference between the teams, as they each had 54 points. Bordeaux were champions. There had been linear progression in the team year after year. Was this seen as a just reward for the progress shown?
I think so. I think so because, as you say, the progression is more or less continuous. If you look when Bez took the team, before he took the team, it was 16. Then after that, it's 10 in 1979, 6 in 1980, third in 91, fourth in 1982, but there was the incident with Pantelic. And before that, they were a title contender, second in 93, and now first in 1984. So you can see that is a team that is very serious, that can win a lot of championships and perhaps French Cups in the years to come, and perhaps to go far in European competition as well.
And a number of Bordeaux players like Alain Giresse, Tigana, Lacombe, and Tussaud were part of the 1984 Euros winning side, while Touvenel was part of the 1984 Olympics gold winning team in Los Angeles. Tigana was particularly impressive and finished second in the 1984 Ballon d'Or behind Platini. Were Bordeaux clearly France's premier side at this point?
I do think so because, as you say, Saint-Etienne was in decline. In fact, was relegated at the end of 1984, 8 years after having played the final of a European competition, which is very weird. And Platini left in 1982. Nantes didn't do a great season after his great season of 1983, finished sixth. Monaco still have a good player, but very young. And PSG was becoming more regular, but not yet as good as we know. Auxerre, it was a small team and had a good season. If you look at the 1984 French team for the European competition, they have five from Bordeaux, five from Monaco, and two from Auxerre, two from Paris, one from Nantes. So you can guess Bordeaux and Monaco are the top teams there. Of course, the star was Platini with 9 goals in 5 games at the Euro. But if I have to remember something from the Euro 1984, in addition to these 9 goals from Platini, it is what Tigana did in semi-final of a Euro
Of course. Yeah.
competition, taking the ball because he didn't want. It was 2-2 at that time with very few minutes left. He didn't want to go to penalty kicks again like 2 years before against West Germany. So he took the ball. He had no more strength, but it's like he flew all over the field and then passed the ball and Platini scored the third goal. This was an amazing, amazing action. So Tigana, fantastic. Platini, fantastic during this Euro 1984.
The 1984-85 season would turn out to be Bordeaux's best season as the side won the league title in a more comfortable fashion. You have the important arrival of Dominique Dropsy from Strasbourg as goalkeeper. He was definitely the international quality goalkeeper that a team like Bordeaux needed.
Mhm.
And you also have at the time the high profile arrival of the Portuguese Fernando Chalana from Benfica, but that would not work out as he would suffer with injuries and would not see much action. And in Europe as well, the team would perform above expectations as it reached the semifinals of the Champions Cup before being eliminated by the Juventus of Michel Platini. In fact, they eliminated Athletic Bilbao, Dinamo Bucharest, and the Soviet side of Dnipro Petrovsk in the quarterfinals before losing to Juventus in the semifinals. Was this the greatest Bordeaux side of the Bez era?
I think so. I do think it's the greatest team that Bordeaux has ever had. In fact, the semi-final of the European competition, it was 3-0 loss in Turin against Juventus. But then it was win 2-0 in Bordeaux, and Tigana almost scored the third goal during the last minutes. It was so close, so close. And when you look at the team of Bordeaux against Juventus in the return leg, it's very strong team. You have Dropsy as a goalie. In defense, Touvenel, Specht, Battiston, Tussaud. In midfield, Rohr, Girard, Tigana, Gires, and forward, Lagorme and Dieter and the sub was Chalana there. Chalana, when he could play, he was phenomenal. I mean, the Euro 1984, he was amazing, especially against France in semi-final. So this team could have won it, could have won that European competition.
Can you describe all the shenanigans that Claude Bez pulled ahead of facing Dnipropetrovsk in Ukraine, then the Soviet Union in the March of 1985?
Yes. So this game, that was interesting because it was 1-1 in Bordeaux and 1-1 in Soviet Union. It was penalty kicks, and it is Chalana who scored the last goal, and he scored with his right foot while he was left-footed, and everybody was surprised, even the coach. But the shenanigans were very interesting. So first, it was supposed to be a plane from Aeroflot to go from
Okay,
Bordeaux.
and let's remind everyone we're
Yeah,
still talking about the Cold War era and communism,
exactly,
etc.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's the Soviet Union, and it has to go to a place which is called Krivoy Rog, there, which is a military. There are a lot of military industries there, and because of that, normally only a Soviet plane can go to Aeroflot from Bordeaux. And Claude Bay said, no, absolutely not. We are going to take a French plane from Air France. But first, it has to go to Kiev there. So they took the Air France from Kiev, and now they have to fly to this Krivoy Rog place in Soviet Union, which has a lot of military industries. And because of that, no Occidental plane has ever landed there. So they asked Soviet navigator to be in the cockpit to tell where to go. But unfortunately, that day there was a huge fog, and they said you cannot fly there the day before the game. So a solution was proposed to take the train for 600 kilometers, 11 hours, and Claude Bez said, absolutely not. We are not going to take the train and arrive at 7 in the morning the day of the game. So nobody knew what's going to happen. And the morning of the game, they took this plane from Aeroflot, and they arrived 3 hours before the game there.
During this decade, also, Claude Bez was credited for getting more money from television for French clubs. How did he achieve this?
So it was an interesting time because at that time, TV can broadcast the games, but they didn't pay a single penny or single franc to the French teams. And Claude Bay said, absolutely not. If you want to see our games, you have to pay. So some TV say yes, some TV say I don't care. I'm still going to broadcast them without paying. And there was a huge fight. Claude Bez was even insulting some journalists there. And but at the end, a lot of them paid Bordeaux to be able to see the games there. And as we said before, so he got money from TV, but he also got a lot of money from the city of Bordeaux, thanks to the mayor Jacques Chaban-Delmas.
And in fact, he had a dispute with the television channel Antenne 2, the second
Yes,
channel, I believe,
that's true.
regarding this.
With Robert Chapat, the journalist, if I remember, very famous one.
Yes. Now we come to the 1985-86 season. We have to mention the previous season. Dieter Müller, famously, he missed a penalty kick in the home match against Dnieper. And I think his form suffered after that. And also, I think he was
Mm.
aging at this point. So he leaves the club. He joins Suicide Grasshopper Zurich. And to replace him, you have another German striker, Uwe Reinders from Werder Bremen. You also have Marc Pascal, a young French striker arriving from Olympique Marseille. Also another midfielder, Jean-Charles Debonne, also from Marseille. Also another defender, Pascal Malbo from Rouen. And during this season, you have Alain Roche moving up from the youth team. But to Marseille, you have Antoine Martinez and Michel Audrin going in the opposite direction, joining Marseille, as well as we mentioned Dieter Müller joining Grasshopper Zurich. There would be some stagnation that season as an aging Bordeaux side who probably peaked in 1985. They finished third, and In our Monaco discussion, we mentioned that 9-0 loss to them
Mhm.
this season. They would be eliminated in the first round in Europe, although they did win the French Cup.
I think it's the
Yeah.
first one in 1941, so
Yeah.
quite some time.
So Bordeaux just did enough to qualify for the Cup Winners' Cup because they won the cup. But was the rejuvenation of the side needed at this point?
Yes. So just before answering this question, this just to come back a little bit about this French final, it's the last game of Alain Giresse for Bordeaux. He will join Marseille later on this
Their
summer.
opponents in the final, in fact.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly the opponent, and he scored the 116 minute, 4 minutes before the end, the last goal. So he helped Bordeaux win the first French Cup since 1941. In terms of older players, indeed, if you look, Dropsy is 34, Specht is 32, Gernot 33, Girard 32, Tigana 31, Gires 33, and Lacombe 33. So you do need to put young players into that team.
Can you describe the events in the summer of 1986 that would make Bez enemies with the emblematic captain of the side, Alain Giresse?
Yes, so what happens? Bordeaux had just recruited 3 young players during that summer, very good ones. Jean-Marc Ferreri, who was supposed to be the successor of Platini, José Touré, one of the most gifted French players ever, and Philippe Vercruis, who can score goals also and is also a playmaker when he wants. But nobody told Gires that he will not be in the starting 11. It will be difficult, but nobody told him. And Gires was thinking of staying in Bordeaux and then joined the technical staff a couple of years later. However, during the World Cup, Bernard Tapie from Marseille called him and said, "Do you want to join our team? I'm putting a very strong team together, as you could have seen with the recent transfer there." And Gires said, "Let me play the World Cup of 86 and then I will think about it." And then after World Cup, say, "Okay, I'm coming to Marseille." Bez was furious because Marseille is a big rival and they could not get along, Tapi and Bez. And he say that Gires told him that he will stay in Bordeaux. So he say Gires is a traitor. Gires himself said that's not true. He never say he will stay in Bordeaux, but in fact, until now, nobody knows the truth. Gires said himself, nobody knows exactly what happened. But he went to Marseille, he played 2 years there, and then he came back to Bordeaux at one point to be in the staff. But he always said that, okay, it was nice to play in Marseille, but it was not his team. His team is Girondins de Bordeaux for sure.
This alleged betrayal would play out in the following season in OM Bordeaux matches. So in the 1986-87 season, you said it's a new look Bordeaux with many young players coming over. You have the Croatian, but then Yugoslav twins, defender and strikers Zoran and Zlatko Vujovic coming from Hajduk Split. Jean-Marc Ferreri came from Auxerre. You mentioned José Touré from Nantes, Philippe Vercruis from Lens. You also have Jérôme Gnaco during the season moving up from the youth team. More importantly, in the second half of the season, you have the arrival of a then unknown French striker, Philippe Farjon from the Swiss league, from Bellinzona. But you have the departures of Marc Pascal, who joined Nice. Tussaud joined Racing Club Paris. Gires, which had joined Marseille. Pascal Malbo joined Alès. And later in the season, Uwe Reinders would also join Stade Rennais. There would be a duel with OM for the league title, and Bordeaux would edge ahead in the second half of the season with the arrival of Philippe Farjon, who made the difference by scoring goal after goal in the second half of the season. In fact, Bordeaux would win the domestic double and against OM in the final as well.
Mhm.
This was their third league title in 4 seasons. And Bordeaux would also reach another European semifinal. They reached the semifinals of the Cup Winners' Cup, being eliminated by Lokomotiv Leipzig. So at this point, were this younger Bordeaux team regarded as the team of the future for the many years to come?
Yes, yes. Let me come back perhaps for a couple of points that you said. So, yes, so Gires is playing in Marseille, and there was a game Bordeaux against Marseille in Bordeaux during the French Championship. And Gires said, "I don't want to play. I do not want to play. I cannot play against Bordeaux, but they forced him to play. And Gernot Rohr was on him and was very bad that day, very tough with him, and he really made a lot of bad tackle against him. And he played against Bordeaux in the French final, but he lost that time on the other side. There, they went very far, as you say, in semi-final of the European Cup Winners' Cup. They lost in penalty kicks in semi-final against Leipzig, with the goalkeeper of Leipzig, René Müller, scoring the winning goal. But as you say, the team was still very strong. Dropsy was edge, but still a very good goalie. You had Batista and Spech, they were over 30, but close to them there was Anna Roche, 18, very good players. Tuvenel and Zoran Vujovic were no experience, 28. Midfield, you had some older players, Girard, Tigana, but younger gifted players, Ferreri, José Touren, Vercruis, all around between 24 and 26. And forward, Lacombe and Reinders, they were over 32, they were playing less, but as you say, Farjon was only 23, scored a lot of goals, and you had Zlatko Vujovic, who had a very good season with Bordeaux. It was a great signing, along with his brother.
Going back to the Alain Giresse' return to Bordeaux. So there's more to this story. So this match was on April 11th, 1987. In the match program, there was no mention of Alain Giresse, and there was a question mark placed on the journal under where his name and photo would have appeared. And like you said, during the match, Gernot Rohr, the tough German defender, was given the task of brutally marking him, obviously from instructions from Claude Bez. And so bad was his treatment by Rohr that I think in the 22nd minute, I think, Jean-Pierre Bad of Olympique Marseille, he reacted to a foul by Rohr, and I think there was an altercation. Bad was definitely sent off. I think Rohr was also sent off. Yeah,
Yes,
so
I think it's true. At 22 minutes, it was 10 players against 10 players.
despite winning the double, were Bez and Bordeaux aware that OM were to be their rivals now, with Bernard Tapie, an equally ambitious and abrasive president in his own right?
Yes, yes, yes. So it was clear from the beginning that Tapie wants to build a very strong team in Marseille. What he say, he wants not only to win the French championship, he say he wants to win the cup with the big ears, which means the European Cup. And right away, he put a lot of money. He attracted a lot of good players. For example, in 86, who did it? Karl-Heinz Forster, the incredible German defender, Giresse, Jean-Pierre
He
Papin,
took Papin from Monaco after he had
Papin.
agreed to join Monaco. Yeah.
Yes. Jean-Pierre Papin, Sliskovic, who was incredibly
Oh yeah,
gifted
Blas
player.
Liskovic. Yeah.
I remember once I saw indoor game between Marseille and Paris in Bercy. There was Sliskovic against Suzik. It was simply unbelievable, technically speaking. Domer, François
Oh yes,
Brisson,
Domer. Yeah. Cubain,
Bernard,
Patrick Cubain.
an Olympic champion, Bernard Gengini, even if he didn't play a
Oh yeah,
lot.
in mid-season, yeah, he came
Yeah.
in with. That's right, from Swiss.
And
Yeah.
then the second year, it's like also politique des vedettes. Leroux, Ayash, Abedi Pelé, De La Montagne, Alofs.
Klaus Allofs. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, who else? Franck Sauzet, Vercruis from Bordeaux, Cantona, Alain Roche, Bordeaux, Moser, Amoros, Deschamps, Tigana, Francescoli, Chris Waddle. So he also put a very, very strong team. So it was a huge rivalry between Marseille and Bordeaux.
In the summer of 87, you have some of the aging players leaving the club. Well, Bernard Lacombe retired. You have Fernando Chalana going back to Benfica. Jean-Charles de Bono joined Bastia. Leonard Spech returned to Strasbourg. And Patrick Battiston joined Arsène Wenger at Monaco. Arsène Wenger is new manager of Monaco. And arrivals, you have Dominique Bijota arriving from Monaco, Eric Pion and Didier Senac defenders coming from Lille and Lens, and a little known Northern Irish striker George O'Boyle from Linfield, who I don't think made many appearances for the club. So for this season, 1987-88, Bordeaux would finish as runner-up, finishing second to Arsene Wenger's Monaco, led by Glenn Hoddle and Mark Haitley, the Englishman, and have a satisfactory run in Europe, where they would reach the quarterfinals and be eliminated to eventual winners PSV Eindhoven. It was the match where Ronald Koeman would get in trouble for praising Tigana being injured. So this would be Aimé Jacquet's last good season. Nevertheless, I believe at this point the team seemed stable enough for future glories.
I think so, because so you have Monaco won the championship, as you say, Atlé and Hodel were magnificent. You have Marseille, which is growing. Paris has won the first championship in '86, but you have Bordeaux is still very solid. I mean, if you look at the team, Dropsy, even if he's 36, is still a very strong goalkeeper. In defense, Ross, Senac, Péan, Touvenel, Zoran Vujovic, very strong. Midfield, Bijota, who can be a great player, Olympic champion in 1884 with France. Girard, Tigana, Ferreri, José Touré, and Farjon Zlakovic still as a forward. So you can predict, I mean, you could have guessed that it can still be a good team. Unfortunately, it didn't happen, but they can still, you are thinking they can still win something.
Another thing to point out that Michel Platini also guested for Bordeaux when they were touring Los Angeles, I think in
Oh,
February, if I'm not mistaken.
okay. I didn't know that.
We come to the 1988-89 season, the pivotal season where everything would come apart, and after a decade of glory, the team would unexpectedly implode. But let's look at the transfers first. We have the departure of Zlatko Vujovic, who joined Cannes. Later, his brother, later in the season, would join him. You have Philippe Farjon. After two successful seasons as goal scorer for Bordeaux, he was offloaded to Servette. José Touré joined Monaco. René Girard, after so many years, rejoined Nîmes. Bijota returned to Monaco after just one season. And as far as the arrivals, you have international striker Yannick Stopira arriving from Toulouse. English striker Clive Allen arrived from Tottenham. Belgian superstar Enzo Schifo arrived on loan from Inter. Bernard Gengini arrived from Marseille. You have defender from Lille, Dominique Thomas. Also, another defender, Eric De Wilder from Lens. Also, as the team was imploding in the season, you have players like Christophe Dugarry and Vicente Lizarazu making the
Mhm.
jump to the first team. Also, later in the season, you have the Danish midfielder Jesper Olsen coming from Manchester United. And a certain Eric Cantona arrived on loan from Marseille after the controversy of where he threw down his shirt in a friendly with Marseille. But these late arrivals would make no difference as the team would finish 13th and Aimé Jacquet would be sacked on February 11, 1989, with Didier Kweku, the general manager, acting as an interim manager. Why do you think the team have such a catastrophic season despite the presence of so many stars like Enzo Schifo, among others?
Yes. To make things even worse, they were also eliminated in the round of 16 French club by Beauvais, a club of
Oh,
second
yes, with
division.
Eric Cantona's
Yeah.
failed Panenka. Yeah.
That's true. So why is that? In fact, when you look at all these stars, they didn't do so well. For example, Schifo, first, he came from Inter, where he didn't play well. There, and in Bordeaux, he didn't play well. It's only after he joined Auxerre and then Monaco that he started to be the Enzo Schifo that we knew. But in Bordeaux, he was not so great. There was also the Englishman, Clive Allen, quite disappointing in my view. Stopira arrived, but he's not the Stopira of the 1986 World Cup with France. Not so great. Marc Pascal, I think, also arrived, but didn't play much. Eric Cantona can be a good player, but as you say, he's a character. And in fact, in some groups, it can be a disaster to have him around. Sometimes he fought with teammates, so I'm not sure he helped to increase the morale inside the group. Jespersen is a good player, but he scored very little. I think in the whole career in Bordeaux, he only scored 3 goals there. So great players, but not having a good season, not playing at the usual level.
In this 1988-89 season, Claude Bez would also be involved with the French national team and would be instrumental in the appointment of Michel Platini as the new manager of France and the removal of Henri Michel. Can you explain this episode?
Yes, so what happened in October 22, 1988, France play in Cyprus for the 1990 World Cup qualifiers, and it was 1-1. A very, very bad result because Cyprus was a very weak team. And even that game, Gérard Passy was playing number 10 at the position of Platini. I think the Journal L'Equipe gave him the grade of 0, which has never been given before. And the coach Henri Michel was fired, and Claude Bez was hired as a superintendent. It was a position made for him, created for him, and he pushed for the appointment of Michel Platini as the head coach of the French team, which is what happened.
For the following season, 1989-90 season, there is a massive team overhaul. And Raymond Goethals, the Belgian manager, is reappointed after a decade. So let's look at the transfer activity first. So obviously, Cantona, who was on loan, he returns to Marseille, but then he's also loaned to Montpellier. Clive Allen returns to England to Manchester City. Jean Tigana joins OM, as does Alain Roche, who, according to him, Claude Bez brought him to his office and said, "We've received an offer in gold. We have to let you go. Sorry," from Tapi. So Enzo Schifo goes to Giroud's Auxerre and his career is resuscitated. You have Dominique Thomas returning to Lille. Eric Perron and Eric De Wilder join Caen. Yannick Stopira joins Cannes. The West German defender, the veteran Manfred Kaltz, had been signed from Hamburg. But after a few months, he's transferred to Mulhouse, who would be relegated that season. William Ayash, former French international, who'd also joined the team, he is also, after a few months, sent to Montpellier. But as far as the arrivals, apart from Raymond Goethals as manager, you have the likes of Dutch striker Piet den Boer, who arrived from Mechelen. German striker Klaus Allofs arrived from Olympique Marseille. Bernard Pardo arrived from Toulon. He would be a key addition in his one season at Bordeaux. Frédéric Mérieux also arrived from Marseille. Jean-Philippe Durand arrived from Toulouse. I mentioned Kaltz had arrived from Hamburg, but only there for a few months. Jean-Luc Dogon, he arrived from Racing Club Paris, who at that point were they still Matra, or they were about to go through the name change.
I think it was the last season because they probably
It
played
was
the
like
French
Racing
final.
Paris and at that point, Patrick Battiston returned to Bordeaux from Monaco. We mentioned William Ayash came from Nantes. Joseph Antoine Bell, a Cameroon goalkeeper, arrived from Toulon, a former OM goalkeeper as well. And later in the season, you have Stéphane Paille arriving from Montpellier. There's this team overhaul. The team overperforms and are league leaders for much of a season before OM overtaking them in the final stretch. Was this seen as a return to norm, or maybe was this revival a false dawn as Bordeaux finished runners up and back to Europe?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a surprise that there were only 2 points behind Marseille in the French Championship, because Marseille was really a very strong team. That year they arrived in semi-final of the European Cup, having been eliminated by the hand of Vata against Benfica. And when you compare the two teams, I think there is no match. Bordeaux is solid, but Marseille is phenomenal. For example, we can look at the players. So Bordeaux, as you say, we had Bell as goalkeeper. In defense, Battiston, Senac, Dogon, Touvenel, Lizarazu. It's good. Midfield, Durand, Pardo, Ferreri, Olsen. This is strong. And forward, Alofs, Denboer, and Pai, which is very strong as well. But if you look at Marseille, you have Uar, the goalie, a good goalie, but the defense is Amoros, Roche, Moser, Dimeco, extremely strong. Midfield, Deschamps, Tigana, Sauzet, Francescoli,
Germain.
Vercruis, Germain, and forward Papin Wadol. This is a phenomenal team. So I think Goethals did a miracle that year to be so close to prevent Marseille from winning the title. I think all the credits, I would say 90% of the credit goes to Goethals for that
And
revival.
I remember Tapi in an interview with Onze Mondial, he said that he knew that Alofs would not last the season or something to that effect. Nevertheless, it was an achievement from the doldrums of the previous season.
Mm-hmm.
We come to the 1990-91 season, and this would signal the end of the Claude Bez era. And there would be many football scandals that season, not just at Bordeaux. Before, let's look at the team first. And let's also mention that this would be the season where Bordeaux would have the maillot scapulaire back, the
Mm.
diagonals at the top. You have Dominic Dropsy retiring. You have Stefan Pai joining Porto in Portugal. Piet Den Boer and Jesper Olsen joined Caen. Bernard Pardo would join Olympique Marseille. Frederic Mérieux would join Toulon. And Klaus Allofs would join Werder Bremen. Now, as far as arrivals, you have the Dutch striker Wim Kift from PSV Eindhoven, the Icelandic striker Arnor Gudjonsson from Anderlecht. Philippe Farjon returned to Bordeaux from Servette. You have the Belgian midfielder Patrick Verwoerd from Anderlecht. Stefan Planck arrives from Stade Brestois. You have Didier Deschamps, loaned from Olympique Marseille. And you have the Algerian midfielder Alim Ben Mabrouk from Racing Paris. You have Jean-Pierre Bad, who we mentioned had that fight with Gernot Roch a few years before. He joined from Racing Paris. And in fact, Gernot Roch would be his manager later during the
Mhm.
season. Bordeaux would suffer because of the scandals. In Europe, they would be eliminated after losing to Roma 5-0 as the scandal is brewing. And you had the farcical situation where in the beginning of the season, Raymond Goethals was the manager at Bordeaux and Gérard Gilly was the manager at OM. And after a few months, the roles would be reversed
Mhm.
as Gilly would be manager at Bordeaux and Goethals at OM. And in between, Gernot Roch would be the manager for like, I think in September, like temporary manager, caretaker manager. Bordeaux would eventually be forcibly relegated, even though they finished mid-table. But the writing was on the wall due to the financial scandal. Can you walk us through the scandal that ended the Bez era at Bordeaux?
There were quite a few of them. I think it started in 1989 because there was an initial tax audit of a team, and they say, "Oh, you are missing 10 million francs." But in fact, when they look at the someone from the city, his name is François Xavier Bordeaux, I think, asked to check more carefully, and they say it's 111 million that are missing. And then there was a prosecutor who opened an investigation against Claude Bez for forgery, use of forged documents, etc. Alain Giresse was also fired because they didn't have too much money there. And after that, the mayor of Bordeaux said, okay, let me check. And they say that, okay, the deficit is 242 million. In fact, it was closer to 300 million. In November 90, Claude Bez was charged with fraud, complicity in forgery, a lot of problems. He was banned from managing the club. He was placed under judicial supervision. He resigned that season.
If I may add, he also admitted that in the past he had offered prostitutes to referees for European Cup matches.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think he did that in October of 1990 in an interview with L'Equipe there. So when he was banned, it's another one, a famous guy, Alain Flelou, who is very famous for making eyeglasses, who took over. And then after that, there is another problem, is the training center in Le Hayan. Basically, Claude Bez said that he needed 44 millions, that he paid 44 million for that. And when they checked, it was 44, there was 10 millions was missing. So problems one after another, unfortunately, for Bordeaux.
That year, obviously, it's like the year of scandals in French football. I think Roland Courbis at Toulon also he got in trouble. So it was not a very good year for French football as far as scandals. In November 26, 1990, he resigned. Claude Bez resigned after a 12-year presidency with all that debt. What was the aftermath for Bez in the subsequent years, beset with all these legal problems?
It was quite bad for him. It was quite bad for the team. As you say, the team finished 10 but was relegated because at that time they say you have a 45 million deficit. But at the same time, in March 1994, basically, Bez was condemned to 2 years in a prison and a fine of 2 million francs for fraud, forgery, and concealment of use of forgery. He died of a heart attack in 1999. So, bad
And he was
ending.
young, relatively young. I think he was like
Yes,
58. Yeah. So,
exactly. Yeah. Born in 1940, so yeah, 58 or 59. Hmm.
I guess despite all his achievements, because of his abrasive manner and all these scandals, they overshadowed his legacy. And he became anonymous along with Tapi with the excesses of and fraud of French soccer in the 80s and 90s.
Hmm.
When Alan Afalou took over, I think he wanted to make a break with that era and he changed the jerseys. He made them burgundy red, which I don't think it sat well with the Bordeaux fans. But
That's true.
eventually in 96, they reverted back to the maillot scapulaire with the navy blue. But getting back, we didn't really discuss this. Aimé Jacquet was unceremoniously sacked in 1989. In retrospect, do you think he was unfairly treated by Bez after so many years of great service?
It's a very good question. And I would say it's difficult to answer because there was some money problem. We could not pay too many players and coaches. And the season 88-89, as we discussed, was not so great. And he stayed 9 years in Bordeaux. Perhaps it was time to leave. And after that, he was not very successful for the French teams in the sense that he went to Montpellier in 89-90 season and they finished 13th and they reached the French Cup final. But it was not anymore Jacquet was sacked. It was Michel Mézy. So he didn't do well. While they had very good team, Russ Asgoli, Ayas, Julio César, Laurent Blanc,
Valderrama.
exactly, Xereb, Cantona, there. And after that, he went to Nancy and they finished 17. It was the Nancy of Zabarov, the guy, and David Zitelli. So he didn't do so well after, but of course, this changed when he took the national French team, for which he went to Euro semi-final in 96 and won the first World Cup in 1998. So perhaps it was time to go, even if it's difficult to say so, because he has built a very strong Bordeaux team.
Is this story a story of linear progression and efficient signings season after season and just the idea of patient team building?
Yes, yes, yes. So if you look at what happened between 78 and 84, I would say you can divide in three different parts. The first one between 78 and 81, the first one between 78 and 84, it's a progression. 10th, 6th, 3rd, 4th, but the problem of Pantelic, second champion. That's very good progression. Then maintain a very high level until 88, champion, 3rd, champion, 2nd. This is remarkable. And then after that, I think it's the Marseille area and Bordeaux cannot follow except in 90. So 13, 2nd, and 10. So very good first two parts and the last part's not so great.
Similarly, there was general progression in Europe, and two semifinal places were rare for French clubs in the 1980s. Is this a noteworthy success as well?
Yes, yes, because if you look in the 70s, what do you have? Saint-Etienne 76 for the C1, Bastia like a miracle in the C3 of 78. And then if you go to the 80s, you have Nantes in semi-final in 1980 of the C2 and Sochaux in semi-final of the C3 81. And Bordeaux, what they do, two semi-final in the 80s, 85 and 87 is quite remarkable. After that, you have, I think it paved the ways for success in the 90s where Marseille play, also Marseille played semi-final in 88 in the C2 against Ajax. But in the 90s, the teams, French teams are much better in European competition. We play three finals, 91, 93, the win and 99 for the C3. Monaco played the final of C2 92. Bordeaux itself played the final of the C3 96. And PSG plays two final of the C2 96. They win 97. I think it was really the rivalry between Bordeaux and Marseille, and then Marseille and Paris, that push the French teams to do much, much better in European competition. So Claude Bez was very important to make that happen.
How did Claude Bez and Bernard Tapie's rivalry improve French football as a whole at home and in Europe?
Yes, I think it's very important. These two guys, these two presidents, of course, both of them had problems at the end of their presidency. They really made two teams that were very, very strong, very competitive, and by hiring very good players, French players, but also outside foreigners players, and very strong rivalry. And then also a strong rivalry between Marseille and Paris after 91. So it was this kind of rivalry that made a couple of French teams really to increase their level and became competitive in European competition. Even Auxerre, which was a small deal, follow because they reached a semi-final of a Europe competition in the 1990s. They gave the feeling that now French team can win.
Is Alain Giresse the most emblematic player of this era when we talk about Bez and Bordeaux?
I think so. I think it's Alain Giresse. I mean, whenever people think about Bordeaux, I will guess they think Alain Giresse.
Yeah, he's a symbol of Bordeaux. He's synonymous with Bordeaux,
He's born,
when I think about it.
20 kilometers from Bordeaux. He always wanted to stay there. He was there when the team was not great. He won championships, French Cups. He went far away in European competition. He became a very strong player for a French team while at Bordeaux. So I think he's the symbol.
How would you compare and contrast the three title winning sides, 1984, 1985, and 1987? Surely the 1985 side has to be seen as the club's greatest ever side.
In fact, it's a tough question because if you look at the 1987, they won the French Championship, 4 points ahead of Marseille, and the French Cup, and they went to a semi-final of a European competition, the C2, that they lost in penalty kicks. But as you say, in this 1987, there is no Giresse. So a team without Giresse is like a Paris without the Eiffel Tower in my mind. So I cannot pick up 1987. So now it's a choice between 84 and 85. And 85 is very, very strong because championship and semi-final of the European competitions against the
Also an
Juventus.
experienced side,
Yes,
basically.
yes,
Yeah.
very, very strong. Not a single weakness at any position.
Yeah.
Just a pity they were not able to defeat the Juventus of Platini and Boniek. Some people may say, what about 96? Because they reached a final too, but it's not the same era. It was kind of miracle they reached this final. In 99, we became French champion, but it was just also one chance, one luck, I will say. Not as strong. It was not continuous over the year. So I agree with you. 1985 will be the one. It saddens me a little bit because Marius Trésor is not here anymore, and I like very much this guy.
Yeah, Marius Trésor, he retired midway through the 83-84 season. Yeah.
He was not even in the Euro 1984
Right,
French
right.
team,
Yeah.
which is a pity also.
Yeah. And it's fair to say that without these titles, I mean, Aimé Jacquet would have never been the French national team manager and perhaps no 1998 title, World
That's
Cup
true.
title.
That's true.
So it shows how important his Bordeaux background was for French football history.
Yes.
Claude Bez was a complex man. Objectively, what were the positives as well as the negatives about him?
So the positive, he was absolutely passionate for his team, very ambitious. He wanted Bordeaux to become the first French team to win a European Cup. It didn't happen. It was very close. And I think he brought the French football, along with Marseille, to a new level. And a lot of people follow Bordeaux. I mean, you didn't have to be born in Bordeaux to basically to like this team. I take this occasion to say hello to Dr. Jose Luis Perez, which is a parent, which is a very good friend and a fan of Bordeaux there. And also, a lot of people went to the stadium because they broke the record of more than 40,000 spectators for the game between Bordeaux and Juventus in the semi-final of a European Cup in 85. The bad things, of course, he didn't follow the laws, a lot of money problem. But I don't know if it's a curse of French football because, as you say, it's not the first one, it's not the last one. You had Roger Rocher with Saint-Etienne, Daniel Esther with PSG, Bernard Tapie with Marseille. So this is the bad part. I mean, we like to see someone who builds a great team and no problem outside football.
Another thing about Claude Bez is that he was seen as a tough man, but a man who kept his word.
Mhm.
That's the one thing that many different people have mentioned. There's an anecdote about Albert Gemrich where apparently he met him and apparently Albert Gemrich agreed to join Bordeaux. And then he asked him, "Don't you want me to sign it in writing? Because, maybe I might join another team after this." And he said, "No, because I don't want an expletives at Bordeaux. And if you do that, that would mean that you are one." So he was seen as a man who did keep his word as far
Mhm.
as contracts and things like that. He also expanded into other businesses. He built the Mérignac Hotel, downtown shops, I guess merchandising. At the time, that may have been new in French football, travel agency, a radio station, and of course, La Hayan was a chateau, was a
Mhm.
castle, and that was converted into a training center.
Yes,
So
yes.
it had some innovations.
It's for sure that he likes his city, he likes his department of Gironde.
So, in closing, what is the legacy of Girondins de Bordeaux of the Claude Bez era for French football? Is it regarded as the club's greatest ever era?
I do think so. There, between 1984 and 1987, 3 years, you have three French titles, two French Cups, and two European semi-finals at time where French teams were doing very bad in European competition. And we don't have to forget that he started with a team that was mid-table or first division at most. He gave confidence to French teams that they can win European competition. And this era between 1982 and 1986, for instance, is the golden era for French soccer. You have one Euro won, 1984. You have one Olympic Games, also won in 1984. And you have two semifinals of the World Cup, 1982 and 1986. And a lot of players from Bordeaux contributed to that. And if you look at some of the players of this Bordeaux team, you have Marius Trésor, Jean Tigana, Alain Giresse, and Patrick Battiston. They are among the most loved French soccer players of all time there. And Claude Bez either made them coming to Bordeaux or built a team around them, especially around Alain Giresse. So very, very important time period of Bordeaux. And you know that Bordeaux is in very low divisions because of money problem. I don't know, it's fourth or fifth divisions right now, which is a tragedy when you have seen this club doing so well in French Championship, French Cups, and even European competitions.
With that, I would like to thank you for your continuous participation in these interviews. All our respective contact information is listed on the blog and podcast uploads. So, Laurent, thank you once again and hope to continue these discussions on French football history.
Great, great pleasure. And once again, thanks again for what you do for football and happy holidays to everyone listening to you.
Thank you.